On March 15, 2026, Michael B. Jordan grabbed his mother's hand before he stood up from his seat at the Dolby Theater. He kissed her cheek. When he reached the microphone, the first two words out of his mouth were, "God is good." He said it twice. Then he started crying. He named every black man and woman who had won that award before him, including Sidney Poitier, Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Jamie Foxx, Forrest Whitaker, and Will Smith, one by one, out loud, in front of everyone. His father had flown in from Ghana to be in the room. His mother had been his date to nearly every award show that season. He told the crowd he was going to keep stepping up. Then the entire room stood. Jordan became only the 6th black man in the nearly 100-year history of the Best Actor category to win it. He was also only the 2nd actor ever to win that award for a horror film, the first being Anthony Hopkins for The Silence of the Lambs in 1992. That second fact is the one that tends to get skipped over in the coverage. The film that earned Jordan that statue was not a typical horror film, and everyone in that room knew it. It was something much harder to categorize, and the longer people sat with it, the more they found buried inside. What exactly was hidden inside Sinners is the question that kept the internet busy for months. The answer starts somewhere most people were never taught about in school. The legend they forgot to teach you, Ryan Coogler set Sinners in Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1932. That specific location was not a random choice. Clarksdale is the town most directly tied to the most famous supernatural legend in American music history, the story of Robert Johnson. Johnson was a real person. He was born in 1911 and died in 1938 at age 27 under circumstances that were never fully explained. What makes him important is what happened in between. By all accounts, Johnson started out as an unremarkable guitar player. Mediocre even. Other musicians at the time reportedly told him to put the instrument down. Then, almost overnight, he came back transformed. Nobody could explain the jump in his ability, so people invented an explanation. The legend says Johnson went to the crossroads at the intersection of Highways 49 and 61 at midnight and met a large, mysterious figure who took his guitar, tuned it, played it, and handed it back. After that night, Johnson could play like nobody had ever heard. The mysterious figure in the legend has been called the Christian devil by some, but that is only one version of the story, and it is not the original one. In West African and Haitian spiritual tradition, the entity associated with Crossroads is a deity called Papa Legba. He has his origins in the ancient Dahomey Kingdom, which is present-day Benin in West Africa. Papa Legba is not a figure of evil. He is the gatekeeper between the human world and the spirit world. He is the intermediary, the being you call on when you are at a turning point and need to cross into something new. Every ceremony in the Vodou tradition begins and ends with him, because nothing can pass between worlds without his permission. When enslaved Africans were brought to America and stripped of their religions by force, these spiritual traditions survived underground. They got mixed in with Catholicism, with Southern folklore, with the blues itself. So when Robert Johnson allegedly went to that crossroads seeking transformation, musical folklorists and scholars of African diasporic religion have argued for decades that the figure he encountered was not the Christian devil at all. It was Papa Legba. The demonization of that story, the flattening of a rich spiritual tradition into a simple deal with Satan narrative, happened because the people doing the retelling did not understand, or did not care to understand what they were actually describing. Taking that story, calling it devil worship, and using it as a reason to suppress the music was itself an act of cultural theft. They took a tradition, stripped out its meaning, replaced it with something sinister, and then used that sinister label to justify controlling the people who created it. Johnson released only 29 songs in his entire life. His most famous was called Me and the Devil Blues. He died before white music executives discovered his recordings and monetized them. He became known as the King of the Delta Blues and the father of rock and roll, and he was already in the ground by the time anyone made real money from his talent. Eric Clapton's band Cream recorded a louder, faster electrified version of Johnson's Crossroads in 1966, helping launch a wave of British and American artists who built careers on music rooted in what black blues musicians had created decades earlier. That pattern is the entire engine of Sinners. And Coogler built his film on top of it with full awareness of what he was doing. The deeper you look at the mythology inside the movie, the sharper the point gets. The film follows twin brothers Smoke and Stack, played by Jordan, who returned to Clarksdale after serving in World War I and working for Al Capone in Chicago. They buy an old sawmill with stolen money and open a juke joint for the local black community. Their younger cousin Sammy, a guitar prodigy nicknamed Preacher Boy, comes to play for the crowd despite his father's warnings that the blues is the devil's music. That night, a coven of vampires arrives, drawn by the music. Coogler was direct in every interview he gave about what the vampires represent. The vampire is the creature most associated with seduction and consumption. It finds something full of life, gets close, and takes everything it has while leaving the body behind. That is exactly what happened to black musical talent across American history. The blues got taken, rock and roll got taken, hip-hop got taken. The people who created those genres built the entire foundation of popular music and in many cases died broke while others built fortunes from their work. The head vampire in the film, a character named Remick, is Irish. He has been alive for centuries, traveling the world, consuming musical traditions wherever he finds them. He tells Sammy that if he joins him, his music will live forever. That offer, immortality in exchange for your soul, is the Crossroads deal in its purest form. Coogler described this as a Faustian bargain embedded in the film's DNA. When you have been dealt a bad hand by society, the offer of escape becomes dangerously tempting. The cost of that escape is what the story is actually about. Sammy refuses. He chooses to stay human, take his music north to Chicago as part of the Great Migration, and keep playing on his own terms. The post-credits scene shows him decades later, old and still performing. The music survived. He survived. And he did not give anyone ownership of either. The scene that made people go back to theaters multiple times is the one midway through the film where Sammy picks up his guitar inside the juke joint and plays. The ceiling disappears. The sky cracks open. Spirits from across the entire history of Black American music appear around the dancers, tribal drums, jazz, soul, early hip-hop, all of it collapsing into the same moment. Past and future exist in the same room at the same time. The music is not entertainment in that scene. It is a ritual act, pulling something through from the other side. This is rooted in a real tradition. In West African culture, the griot is a hereditary musician and oral historian whose job is not entertainment but preservation. The griot keeps the community's memory alive through music. The songs connect the living to the ancestors across generations in the absence of written records. When enslaved Africans were brought to America, this function survived inside the music. The blues, in this reading, is not a genre. It is the last surviving form of a spiritual practice that was forced underground and then relabeled as sinful by the same institutions responsible for the conditions that created it. The film grossed over $370 million worldwide, against a budget from $90 million to $100 million. It received a record-breaking 16 Academy Award nominations, more than any film in the history of the institution. It won 4 awards: Best Actor for Michael B. Jordan, Best Original Screenplay for Ryan Coogler, Best Cinematography for Autumn Durald Arkapaw, who became the first woman ever to win in that category, and Best Original Score for Ludwig Göransson. The Oscars did not just reward a well-made film, They rewarded a film that said something specific and uncomfortable about American history and dressed it in vampire teeth so it would go down easier. The man who made it and what it actually cost. Coogler has made every single one of his 5 films with Michael B. Jordan. Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, Sinners. 14 years of creative partnership at the highest level of the industry. That kind of sustained collaboration between a director and an actor is almost unheard of at this scale. Jordan described reading the Sinners script as one of the most emotional experiences of his professional life. He said he laughed, cried, got angry, and felt inspired all within a single read. What drew him in first was how personal Coogler's connection to the material was. Coogler based the story in part on the life of his own Uncle James, the eldest male figure in his family and a blues musician from the Mississippi region. This was not a genre exercise. It was a family story told through mythology. Playing twin brothers is a technical mountain that very few actors have attempted at this scale. Jordan had to shoot every shared scene multiple times, going through 4 or 5 takes as one brother, resetting, then doing it again as the other, while the production digitally composited both performances together. He had to make them feel like 2 genuinely distinct people, not 2 versions of the same face. He said it was the hardest thing he had ever done professionally, and that it took months before the switching between them felt natural. Jamie Foxx, who won his own Best Actor Oscar in 2005, said publicly after Jordan's win that he could barely breathe watching it happen, calling Jordan's performance incredible and saying he deserved 2 Oscars for the single role. Will Smith posted within 24 hours, calling it history being made. 2 of the men Jordan named from the stage that night responded by name, completing the circle he had drawn in his speech. But here is the part of the story that most people either glossed over or misunderstood when it first came out. The deal Coogler made with Warner Brothers to get this film made is as much a part of the film's meaning as anything on screen. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The real deal at the crossroads. When Coogler shopped the Sinners script around Hollywood in early 2024, it triggered a bidding war among studios. Sony, Universal, and Warner Bros. All wanted it. But attached to the script were 3 conditions that Coogler refused to negotiate on. First, he wanted final cut privilege, meaning the finished film would be his version, not the studio's. Second, he wanted first dollar gross, meaning he would receive a percentage of box office revenue from the very first dollar earned, not after the studio recouped its costs. Third, and this is the one that made certain executives walk away, he wanted ownership rights to the film to revert back to him 25 years after its release. In the year 2050, Sinners belongs to Ryan Coogler. Several studios said no. Warner Brothers said yes. And the moment that news became public, a certain section of Hollywood had a quiet meltdown about it, with one anonymous executive telling a trade publication that the deal could be the end of the studio system. Coogler himself pointed out that Quentin Tarantino and other directors had secured similar arrangements before him, and that nobody wrote think pieces calling those deals existential threats to the industry. When asked why his deal drew so much more attention than comparable deals made by white directors, he laughed and said he had his guesses but would rather not say. The irony is almost too precise. Coogler made a film explicitly about Black artists having their work taken from them, about the pattern of creation without ownership that has defined Black artistic history in America. And then he negotiated a contract that broke that pattern for himself. He wrote the Crossroads deal into both the script and his own life, and he came out on the other side holding the rights. Robert Johnson created the king of the Delta blues and died at 27 with essentially nothing. Ryan Coogler will own his version of that story in 2050. What the devil actually represents. To be clear about what this film is and is not claiming, Sinners is not arguing that Robert Johnson literally sold his soul at a physical crossroads. It is not claiming devil worship is real or that blues musicians made supernatural pacts for talent. What it is doing is using a mythology that already existed around the music to name a historical reality that has never been fully accounted for. The pattern the film describes is documented and real. Black artists created the blues. White commercial institutions discovered it, packaged it, and sold it back to the world under different names while many of the original creators died in poverty. This happened with the blues. It happened with rock and roll. Elvis Presley became the king of rock and roll while the black artists he was directly influenced by remained largely invisible to mainstream white audiences. It happened with hip-hop, where decades of black creative work built a global industry that, for much of its history, was largely controlled by people who did not create it. The vampire metaphor is not subtle because it was never meant to be subtle. Coogler wanted the parallel to be obvious. He wanted audiences who might not know this history to walk out of a vampire horror film having absorbed it anyway. And the thing about Papa Legba, the real figure at the crossroads before the story got retranslated into Christian terms, is that he is not a figure of evil or damnation. He is a bridge. He opens doors between worlds. He does not take your soul. He facilitates communication between the living and what came before. The demonization of that figure, the replacement of a spiritual bridge with a devil, is the same act the film is critiquing. It is the same erasure, performed on a different kind of material. Sammy in the film does not make the deal. He refuses. He takes his music north. He plays until he is old. He survives and keeps creating on his own terms. That is the film's answer to the legend. Not a warning about danger, but a story about refusal. About what happens when you hold on to what is yours. The Oscars rewarded it with 4 statues and 16 nominations. Jordan stood at that microphone, naming his lineage out loud. Coogler walked away with a screenplay award and a contract that gives him his film back in 25 years. The devil, in this version of the story, did not collect anything. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.